Hi everyone, I'm David Aragona, and this is the 2020 TimeformUS Road to the Kentucky Derby series. In this video, I'm going to take a look at the second division of the Risen Star Stakes, which goes as race 13 on Fairgrounds Saturday card. I did another video covering the first division of this race, which you can find on DRF.com or the DRF YouTube page. But this second division of the race has drawn the field of 12 horses, and there is a standout who's likely to be the prohibitive favorite as we look at the entire field, and that is the number 8, Anno D'Or. A lot of the horses coming out of the prep for this race, the Lecomte, wound up in the other division, and you've got a lot of newcomers in this race, horses coming out of Maiden and Allowance Company, and it's just created a situation where the number 8, Anno D'Or, has by far the best resume, at least in stakes races, of all the horses coming into this race, and it's going to make him a prohibitive favorite. We'll see how they bet this race and what kind of trip Anno D'Or gets. And let's start by taking a look at the TimeformUS pace projector to get some sense of that. Now, I talked about in the first division of this race how there was a fast pace predicted, and I was a little skeptical that it would actually develop. In this division of the race, I think that the pace that's predicted to be fast is likely to be so on Saturday, because the number 12, New York Traffic, has a ton of speed, and he's breaking from the outside post, so he's going to have to go pretty quickly, I think, to make the front end here, which has to be the plan under Javier Castellano. It's the way that he was successful last time out. So if he tries to make the front, I think it could force the hand of some horses to his inside, particularly a runner like the number 5, Liam's Lucky Charm, who won in gate-to-wire fashion going a sprint distance last time. And even a horse like the number 2, Truculent, who's predicted to be a little farther behind in the pace projector. He won a maiden race setting an honest pace in a route race at the Fairgrounds last time, so he could be forwardly placed as well. And the number 8, Anno D'Or, who's second in the pace projector, he's first-time blinker, so you never know how that's going to affect his running style. He might be closer to the pace than he's been in some recent races as well. And speaking of that likely favorite, let's take a look at his past performances. He's just coming into this race in top form ever since he switched to dirt in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile 2 back. Just seems like he's defying his pedigree, and he's probably a better dirt horse than he was even on turf. And speaking of that Breeders' Cup Juvenile, let's take a look at that race, because he ran really well this day. He looks briefly at the top of the stretch like he's going to win it all, but the eventual winner of this race stormed the court down on the inside. He battles back and gamely fends off Anno D'Or in the late stages of this race, but Anno D'Or covered more ground than him coming around the turns. He was about 3 wide around the first turn and 4 wide around the second turn. So he definitely runs well to be second here. A lot of people have knocked this Breeders' Cup Juvenile because he was dominated by long shots, but we've seen all of the horses coming out of this race validate that speed figure. Storm the Court did that, even though he was off the board in the San Vicente last week. He ran essentially the same speed figure. And Anno D'Or came back in the Los Alamitos Futurity last time and ran just a few points lower when losing to Bob Baffert's 1,000 Words, who's now undefeated and one of the top Derby prospects out there. My one question with Anno D'Or is that he's getting back on a fast dirt track here, and he ran over that quirky track at Santa Anita on Breeders' Cup week. Then he was on a sealed track at Los Alamitos last time. He's handled different types of surfaces, but now they're trying a new surface at the Fairgrounds, and maybe he can do it all. He just seems like a horse that so far has run on any type of surface, but he's so obvious in this race because he's got that major class edge. His speed figures point him out as the horse to beat. Just feels like he's going to be an awfully short price in what is otherwise a pretty competitive race, so I'm skeptical that we're going to get any kind of value on him. So while I respect him and think that he is the horse to beat, I want to look elsewhere for my top pick in this race. And let's take a look at some of the other contenders. Another horse that is likely to take some money in here is the number 11, Mailman Money. He is undefeated in 2 career starts, both of which, or one of which came at Churchill Downs, the other one at the Fairgrounds. Now, at the Fairgrounds last time, he won that allowance race stretching out for the first time and did it in very impressive fashion, but that was an off the turf race. And while there were some main track only runners in there to make it a legitimate dirt race, he wasn't beating the strongest field that day. From a visual standpoint, it was impressive. I'll give him that. And the TimeformUS speed figure of 103 is legitimate and makes him a contender in this race. But he got such a good trip that day, and now he's breaking from post number 11, one inside of that likely speed horse, New York Traffic. So his rider, Gabriel Size, is going to have to be aggressive to get him into position early. These connections do well. They upset the Louisiana Derby last year with a horse coming out of a non-stakes race. That was by my standards. He won that race at a price, so maybe they can pull it off again here with Mailman Money. Just want to see him prove it against some better competition before I back him in a race of this caliber. Another horse that I would consider is the number 9, Lin's Map. This is a horse that I was really high on before he was scratched in the Lecomte. He ended up running the Smarty Jones instead a week later, and he didn't perform well that day. That race was a real disappointment. He was up close to a pace that pretty much held together. You see those blue color-coded TimeformUS pace figures indicating a slow pace. He was right on top of it. That pink color-coded race rating box indicating that it was a somewhat speed-favoring track. So he really had no excuse to back up that day, especially considering that while it was on a wet track, he had handled a wet track too before that when he won that allowance race, beating Mr. Monroy, who's in the other division of this Risen Star. Just seems like for whatever reason, he didn't perform time. The good news is that now he's getting back to fairgrounds where he ran so well two back, but still, he's got to run a little bit faster on the speed figure scale to be considered a top contender in this race. I'm not sure what to do with him. He's going to be a better price in this race than he was in the Smarty Jones last time, so I don't want to totally count him out. I still have some faith that he can rebound, but I don't totally trust him, so I'm going to use him somewhere underneath, but he's not my top pick in this race. Another horse that I think you have to discuss because he's going to have an impact on the pace is the number 5, Liam's Lucky Charm. I mentioned in the pace projector he was shown just off of the lead of New York Traffic. I'm not going to be surprised, though, if Edgar Zayas is really aggressive coming out of the gate and tries to hold that inside position that he has and go to the lead in this race because he was so successful leading the entire way in the Pasco last time at Tampa Bay Downs. Now, note that this horse is aggressively ridden first-time blinkers in this race, and he showed a lot more speed with the blinkers added than he had in any of his races as a 2-year-old. But even though he showed a lot of speed and set an honest pace in this race, he draws off pretty impressively at the end. Now, it's worth noting this wasn't a field of high quality. The runner-up is just not really a true Derby prospect. The third-place finisher, No Getting Over Me, did come back and was beaten a long way in the Sam F. Davis last weekend, but he did basically repeat his TimeformUS speed figure, so I think the figure of 106 that Liam's Lucky Charm earned is legitimate. My problem is that was a somewhat speed-favoring racetrack, so we had some things working in his favor that day. Also, his one start around 2 turns as a 2-year-old was by far the worst performance that he's put forth in a stakes race yet, so I'm not sure that the 2-turn mile and an 1/8 distance is really going to be up his alley, but he is a horse that could have an impact on the end of this race if he forces a fast pace. A horse that really interests me in this race at what should be a pretty square price is the number 6, Accession. He's one of the few horses coming out of the Lecomte that wound up in this division of the race, and he was beaten by a lot of the other horses coming out of the Lecomte that are in the first division, but maybe that's not so bad because the only horse that's really formidable in this race is Anneau d'Or, and the others just look really even both from a speed figure and class standpoint. And looking at Obsession's last effort in that Lecomte, I didn't love the ride that he got that day. He saved some ground, but he was pretty keen in the early going. CJ Hernandez, his rider, was trying to get him to settle, and I think he just got tricked into moving a little bit too soon on this horse coming around the far turn. He put him under a drive before they even got to the 3/8 pole and made this horse go wide to start to make that early move. He ended up getting nearly on terms with the leaders by the time they got to the top of the stretch, but he had just expended too much energy up to that point and ended up steadily fading through the lane, beaten a long way by the time they got to the finish line. But I just think this is a horse that's more effective when he can make one long, sustained run and not make that early premature move. You saw two back, all those blue color-coded pace figures when he lost to Lin's Map, who's also in this race. That pace just did not work out in Accession's favor because he's more of a plodding type who wants to close. He's not going to be successful in a slow-paced situation like that. There's going to be more pace in this race for him to close into. Now he's getting a rider switch to Ricardo Santana, who's done the best on him so far. Santana's probably just going to take him to the back of the pack, try to make one run, and I think that could be more successful. Is he as good as a horse like Anneau d'Or based on what he's shown on the racetrack so far? No. But if Anneau d'Or takes a step back and Accession seems like a horse who still has a little bit of upside, maybe he could step forward and upset this race at a price, because I think he's going to be a higher price than he really deserves to be based on his form from Churchill Downs last year and that allowance race that he ran two back at the fairgrounds. So he's going to be my pick in this race at a price, but I do want to discuss some other horses that I want to use in conjunction with him. One of those that's going to take some money is the number 1 Modernist, and he's a horse that I would consider, but that I'm not really high on in this race. Bill Mott is shipping 2 horses out to the fairgrounds for these 2 divisions of the Risen Star. I like his horse in the first division more, Moon Over Miami. I'm a little bit less enthusiastic about Modernist. We'll take a look at his maiden run last time at Aqueduct, and this race was okay. He wins a maiden race over a good sealed track on a day where that Aqueduct main track did take a lot of rain, especially after this race. But This was not a particularly competitive field. I guess he deserves some credit for winning going this mile and an eighth distance, but the runner-up here, Cowtown, is a Todd Pletcher horse who's had a lot of chances, just isn't really that good. The third place finisher is a horse who really is better on the turf. And I just wanted to see Modernist, who was 1-5 in this race, legitimately so, show more in the lane and draw to win by a bigger margin with a faster, more impressive speed figure. He did run well, too, back on that Cigar Mile undercard day at Aqueduct on December 7th when he was closing well behind two talented runners, Cost Basis and Kingmeister. But still, he only earned a 95 TimeformUS speed figure. He's got to get faster to win this race, and I think he's going to attract some support due to that rail post position and the fact that he's going out for Bill Mott, who did win the Kentucky Derby last year. If I'm going to take a horse coming out of a maiden race, I'd rather it be the number 7 Major Fed, who's another horse who could get lost on the board here and be a price in this race. He won his maiden at the Fairgrounds last time, going the mile and a 16th distance. And of all the horses coming out of maiden victories, I was most impressed by him. The pace of that race was not particularly fast. You see those blue-colored coded TimeformUS pace figures in his PPs. He overcame all of that and unleashed a really effective turn of foot coming to the top of the stretch, quickly shut the door on the rest of the field, opened up a significant margin by the time they got to the 8th pole, and continued to widen as they got to the wire. That was his first start in blinkers, and while he was a little keen in the early going, he settled pretty nicely under Brian Hernandez Jr. and finished that race off well, so I like all of that. He's by Ghost Zapper. He's a full brother to a horse named Zapparini, who could go longer distances on the turf, even tried marathon distances a couple of times, so I don't think the distance is going to be a major problem for him. Maybe he's a horse that eventually down the line will be better on the turf because he showed that effective turn of foot last time, but I think he showed some promise in that last race. And the other thing I want to note is in the upper left-hand corner where his running style is listed, he's got a TimeformUS late pace rating of 102. Of all the horses in this race, that is by far the highest, and that's important to note because the TimeformUS pace projector is predicting a fast pace, and when you see a fast pace predicted, you often want to look for the horse that has the highest TimeformUS late pace rating, and that is Major Fed, so maybe he's going to be most likely to take advantage of that fast pace if it develops. So he's one that I would definitely use underneath. But as I said, I want to take a shot in this race and find some value, so my top pick is the number 6 Accession. I'd want a price on this horse, hoping to get somewhere in the 10 to 12 to 15 to 1 range on him. Definitely, he's a horse who should be double-digit odds. I'm not against the favorite Anno D'Or, just think he's not going to offer a ton of value. And it also used the number 9 Lynn's Map and that aforementioned maiden breaker from last time, the number 7 Major Fit. So that's a look at the second division of the Risen Star on Saturday at the Fairgrounds. As I mentioned at the top, you can also catch my preview of the first division in another video on the DRF.com website or the DRF YouTube channel.